His name was Gary Lowell, and he had been promoting concerts in the American Midwest for 14 years. 14 years was long enough to have developed a reliable sense of what sold and what didn't, which venues could support which kinds of acts, and most importantly, which artists had enough remaining commercial appeal to justify the financial risk of booking them. Concert promotion was, at its foundation, a risk management business. You paid for the venue, you paid for the production, you paid for the advertising, and then you waited to see whether the public agreed with your assessment of the artist's drawing power. When you were right, the margin was good. When you were wrong, the loss was total. Gary Lowell had been doing this for 14 years, and he had developed through the specific education of being both right and wrong enough times to understand the difference. A set of instincts he trusted. In the spring of 1982, those instincts told him that Tina Turner was finished. This was not a cruel assessment. It was not personal. It was the kind of assessment that a promoter makes when he looks at the available data, the record sales, the radio play, the ticket history, the name recognition in the specific market he operates in, and draws a conclusion about commercial viability. The data in the spring of 1982 was not favorable to Tina Turner. She had not had a significant hit since the Ike and Tina Turner review years. She had been playing smaller venues, working her way back from the collapse of that era, and the audiences she was drawing were not the audiences that filled the kinds of buildings Gary Lowell preferred to book. She was, in the language of the industry, a legacy act whose legacy was fading. He said so plainly when Roger Davies called. Roger Davies had been managing Tina Turner's career since 1980, and he had been making calls like this one, calls to promoters, to venue managers, to radio programmers, to anyone who might be persuaded to give her a platform for 2 years. He had developed, over the course of those 2 years, a practiced relationship with the specific experience of being told no, which is to say, he had learned to hear it without letting it become the last word, to treat each no as a data point rather than a verdict, to understand that the people saying no were making rational decisions based on available information, and that the job was to change the information rather than to argue with the rationality. Gary Lowell's no was delivered with the specific directness of someone who does not enjoy wasting time on either side of a conversation. He said, "Look, I respect what she did. The review was something, but that was a long time ago. The market she had, that audience, has moved on. I can't put her in a building I can't fill, and right now, I can't see her filling the buildings I work with. I'm sorry." Roger Davies said, "I understand." He thanked Gary Lowell for his time. He wrote the name in the column of his notebook that was labeled, without irony, "Not yet." He moved on to the next call. Gary Lowell moved on too. He had 12 other acts to think about, 3 venue contracts to negotiate, and a summer touring season to plan. Tina Turner was a line in a notebook somewhere, a conversation he had for 2 minutes in the spring of 1982, and then stopped thinking about. The way you stop thinking about things that have been decided. He did not think about her again for almost 2 years. What happened in those 2 years did not happen in any single dramatic moment. It happened the way real things happen. Gradually, through the accumulation of small events that individually seem insufficient and collectively constitute a transformation. There was the recording of Private Dancer in London, the songs assembled from material that Roger Davies had been collecting for years, the specific process of building an album that knew what it wanted to be rather than what the market expected it to be. There was the decision to record What's Love Got to Do With It after Tina had jogged at a microphone until her body found the rhythm her mind had been resisting. There was the release, the slow build of radio play, the single climbing the charts in the summer of 1984 with the specific momentum of something that has been held back for a long time and has finally found the opening it needed. There was the #1 position, 3 weeks, the oldest solo female artist to reach it. There were the Grammys, 3 of them, in February of 1985, Record of the Year and Best Female Pop Vocal and Best Female Rock Vocal, awarded to a woman who 2 years earlier could not get a concert promoter in the American Midwest to return a phone call. There was the tour, the Private Dancer Tour, which had begun modestly and grown with the record, the venues increasing in size as the ticket demand made clear that the buildings Gary Lowell had said she couldn't fill were not, in fact, the limit of what she could fill. And then Roger Davies's phone rang. It was the spring of 1985, and the voice on the other end was Gary Lowell's, and the specific quality of the call, the careful professional warmth of someone who needs something from a person they previously dismissed, was something Roger Davies recognized immediately, because he had been on the receiving end of enough of these calls in the previous 6 months to have developed a practiced relationship with that quality too. Gary Lowell said, "I wanted to reach out about a potential booking for Tina. We have some dates in the Midwest that I think could work really well. The market out here has responded incredibly to the record, and I think we could put together something significant." Roger Davies said, "I appreciate you calling. Let me ask you something." Gary Lowell said, "Of course." Roger Davies said, "What venues are you thinking?" Gary Lowell named a venue. It was not the venue he had been working with in 1982, it was larger, significantly larger. The kind of building that required a different level of production and a different level of confidence in the artist's drawing power. He named it with the specific confidence of someone who has done his research and knows that what he is proposing is not a reach. Roger Davies said, "That's a 10,000-seat building." Gary Lowell said, "Yes." Roger Davies said, "We're going to need something bigger." There was a pause on Gary Lowell's end of the line, the specific pause of a promoter recalibrating. He had done his research. He had looked at the ticket sales from the tour dates that had already happened, at the speed with which those tickets had moved, at the ratio of demand to capacity that was becoming, in market after market, embarrassingly clear. He had thought he understood the scale of what was happening. He was discovering in real time that he had underestimated it. He said, "What size are you looking at?" Roger Davies said, 15, maybe 18, depending on the market. Gary Lowell said, "I can work with that. Let me look at what's available." What was available, when Gary Lowell looked, was a building in Chicago that seated 16,000 people. He booked it. He paid the venue deposit, which was considerably larger than the deposit he had paid for anything he had booked in the previous 3 years. He began the advertising campaign. He watched the tickets move. They moved faster than he had anticipated. This was something that Gary Lowell would say in the years afterward when he told this story to other promoters, that he had done his research, had looked at the sales data from other markets, had made what he believed was an accurate projection of demand, and then watched the actual demand exceed the projection in the first week of sales. The building he had booked was filling faster than it should have been filling based on everything he thought he knew, and the specific feeling that produced, the feeling of a professional watching a situation exceed the model he built for it, was one he had not experienced in 14 years of doing this. He called Roger Davies. He said, "The Chicago date is selling faster than I expected. I want to talk about adding capacity." Roger Davies said, "How much faster?" Gary Lowell gave him the numbers. Roger Davies listened to the numbers. Then he said, "What are you proposing?" What Gary Lowell was proposing was a production expansion. Additional staging, floor seating, the specific reconfiguration of a large arena that allows you to add several thousand seats to a venue that was designed for a fixed capacity. It was expensive. It required renegotiation with the venue, additional production contracts, and the willingness to absorb costs that had not been in the original budget. Gary Lowell had done the math. The demand justified the expense. He was willing to pay it. He said, "I want to add floor seating and extend the stage configuration. We can get to about 22,000 if we do this right." Roger Davies said, "Let me talk to Tina." He talked to Tina. She said yes, not because the number of seats mattered to her in the way that it mattered to Gary Lowell, not as a metric of commercial success, but because 22,000 people were 22,000 people, and she had been giving what she had to rooms of every size for 25 years, and the size of the room had never changed what she brought to it, only the scale at which she could give it. The production expansion happened. Gary Lowell paid for it, the additional staging, the floor seats, the extended configuration, all of it coming out of a budget that had not anticipated these costs when the booking was made 3 months earlier. The building that seated 16,000 was reconfigured to hold 22,000. The additional seats sold. The show happened. 22,000 people showed up. Gary Lowell stood at the back of the arena that night and watched the building fill and stayed for the show, which he had not originally planned to do. He had work to do, other calls to make, the next booking to think about. But he stayed. He watched the 16,000 seats he had originally booked fill, and then watched the 6,000 additional seats fill, and then watched 22,000 people respond to what was happening on the stage with the specific and unmistakable quality of an audience that is not just attending a concert, but experiencing something they did not fully know to expect. He had told Roger Davies in the spring of 1982 that Tina Turner was finished. He had said it plainly and without cruelty, as a professional assessment based on available data. The data had been wrong, or rather, and this was the distinction that Gary Lowell found himself returning to in the years afterward, when he told this story and tried to explain what he had gotten wrong. The data had been accurate about where she was, and completely unable to account for where she was going. That was the thing about Tina Turner that no dataset could have predicted in 1982. Not the record sales, not the radio play, not the ticket history, not the name recognition in the Midwest market. None of those things could measure what was actually happening, which was a woman in her early 40s rebuilding a career from nothing with the methodical, unhurried determination of someone who has decided what she is going to do and is simply doing it, one day at a time, one show at a time, until the world catches up. The world caught up. Gary Lowell caught up too. He booked her again the following year and the year after that, and he never again made the mistake of assuming that the current data was a reliable guide to the future of an artist who had already demonstrated that her relationship with current data was adversarial at best. He learned this lesson once at the cost of a production expansion he had not budgeted for, and he did not need to learn it again. In 1982, he had said, "Tina Turner is finished, no one will buy tickets." In 1985, he paid to add 6,000 seats to a building that was already sold out. The distance between those two sentences was the distance between what the data said and what she knew, which was that she was not finished. She had never been finished. She had simply been in the part of the story that comes before the part everyone wants to see, doing the work that makes the rest of it possible, in rooms that were smaller than she deserved, and in front of audiences that were not yet as large as the ones that were coming. They were coming. She had always known they were coming. She just kept going until they arrived. If this story stayed with you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe for more untold moments from the lives of music's greatest legends, the rooms where no became yes, the bookings that changed everything, the people who said it was over and then paid to add more seats. And if someone has ever told you that you were finished, tell us about it in the comments. Hit the notification bell so you never miss one of these stories.